So our next speaker is Michael Hallsmore from DataRT.
DataRT, that's right. So DataRT is our working name at the moment. So Peter and I, Peter over here, we've come along at what would be a much earlier stage, I think, from the majority of what else I've heard tonight. So I'll continue. So we see DataRT as financial pricing data for the 21st century. And now what I mean by that is updating a lot of the practices that are built into banks and funds. You know, a lot of these are quite old practices using technology which I personally would consider to be out of date. So our mission here is to provide the asset management industry with extremely robust financial instrument data and analytics to increase their investment and portfolio performance. So what is a market problem? Poor data cleanliness and reliability. So a lot of the vendors in data finance, they can be ridden with a lot of mistakes, and these mistakes can be very costly for trading models and investment advice. Not only that, but the feeds that they provide can go offline, so people can have trouble getting data when they really need it. Okay, not only that, but because there's only a certain number of players right at the top end of the space, they can charge huge licensing fees, a lot of money, and they're not immediately directly related to the value they're providing. As I was referring to a minute ago, a lot of the methods of getting the data to you, they're very outdated. Okay, so they're relying on sometimes email, or downloading zip files, or FTP distribution. These are all sort of 20th century technologies, not really leveraging any of the things that you'd find in the sort of web application space these days. Once the fund has the data, they're having to solve a lot of these problems again. They're fixing a lot of the issues. They're having spikes in prices. A lot of these issues are cropping up, and they're happening across every fund. And so a lot of cumulative development time is actually spent in fixing these problems. So the solution that we are considering is what we'd call a highly available, very well documented, and scalable application programming interface. So this is a web endpoint that firms can come and get hold of. They can get whatever data that they need. They can get it when they want. It's incredibly scalable and incredibly robust, and it will have a lot of cleanliness associated with it, which is incredibly important. So we also want to have a very transparent pricing model. We don't want to bamboozle people with incredibly high fees. We want to make a model that's based on usage and data amount, essentially. But we see our main selling point here as incredibly clean and robust data. So making sure, absolutely, that there are just no mistakes in the data that we're providing to firms. One example is that plagues many firms is corporate action. So this is dividends, stock splits, all of the sort of nitty-gritty scenarios that happen that affect stock prices and are just a real pain to work with. So essentially our solution will be saving these funds and fund data providers a significant amount of very expensive ongoing development time. So I think I've gone over a little bit about the business model. A freemium subscription model. So for low volume data, this would be end of day stock prices. This sort of stuff is already provided to some extent by Google and Yahoo. Our essential point would be that we are able to clean it a lot better than these companies. We would be probably giving this away at a certain timeliness for free. What we'd really be paying for, what we'd be charging for, is high real-time available data, essentially, and in more of the niche markets. So what we would like to do is make use of 21st century technology, such as the cloud, and storing data in a very highly scalable, robust environment. So we see a few paths to market. For the hedge funds and the hedge fund administrators, we would be looking at client sales, so B2B essentially. These would be for the real-time data. They're doing a lot of volume. At the lower end of the market, which would be retail, people who are interested in getting pricing feeds in retail for their own trading, we'd probably look at search engine optimization and search engine marketing. And to draw those people in, we would have a community. That we'd have a blog, tutorials, and articles, and forum. Okay, so because we're very early stage, and this is very much at the idea stage right now, what we are really interested in is chatting to people, actually finding out problems and data problems that you're actually having. So what are your data pain points? Okay, what is getting on your nerves every day? How could we help you solve it, essentially? On top of that, we're doing a lot of research around all of the different niche financial instruments that pricing is quite difficult to get for. These would be areas like emerging markets or some exotic derivatives in certain areas. We're also considering developing an API for our own internal use, which we will provide as a private beta scenario to some people that would be interested. Although probably at this stage, we're more interested in chatting to people who have data problems. Right now, we're not really interested in raising capital. We're just interested in talking to people. So that's where we are. Thank you for listening.
Two questions spring to mind.
Yep.
Firstly, you seem to basically be trading on the idea that the data feeds from other companies are a bit rubbish.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that may well be the case, but once they've got some competition, it's not that difficult for them to just be less rubbish.
As in, because they've already got their customers, it's...
Well, yeah, I mean, it's not that difficult for them to eat your lunch, is it really? I mean...
I don't know. I mean, in my personal experience, even after we pestered a lot of people... Well, I used to work in this, actually, a while back, and even after we pestered them, had a relatively large customer support contract, they were still quite lax to actually fix these data problems.
Oh, yeah, I don't doubt it, because they're big companies and take a while to move. But the second thing kind of ties into that is that how are you getting your raw data? Because either you've got to pay a fortune to get it directly from the markets, or you've got to aggregate it and basically buy it off the companies that you're trying to squeeze out, like Thomson Reuters, right?
Yeah, this is true, exactly. I mean, part of our initial scenario right now is to actually find out the types of data that people are interested in. So really that would boil down to what type of data we're getting. If people are interested in high volume equities, then that's a very different case for niche exotic credit derivatives. And so there might be a lot of feet on the ground approach with some types of data, especially in more emerging markets areas. We might need to actually go to places and find this data. It's very different, depending on what type of data it is. So at this stage, we're just keen to hear about the data issues people are having, rather than how we ourselves will probably go and get this data. That's part two.
And I think it's also worth mentioning that the scale at this point is quite important. We're not looking to compete with FactSet or Bloomberg. We're trying to find a niche, trying to find certain data streams, and make sure that those data streams are extremely reliable and clean, and not try to do 100 or 150 right at the start.
So you should definitely come and talk to me, because we have 8 different vendors feeding in at the moment. I'm well familiar with all the problems. It's part of what we do as a business. I mean, a couple of things. The first is, from a data pricing perspective, right? The ultimate driver of the data price is the data producer, which is not you guys, right? Mm-hmm. So you can't tell NYSE that they're going to charge less per user for the particular piece of data, right?
So
there's a lower threshold, and I think when you get into some of the more easy to get stuff, we're already seeing a kind of lower threshold that is, pennies above the exchange feeds. If you go to like an Xignite or something like that, we're already at the kind of low cost base. My other question is, when I hear about the other stuff and you talk about data cleaning, I wonder where your army of humans is going to be, because corporate actions are an AI complete problem, right? Yeah. And if you're saying, well, we're going to properly apply all corporate actions the moment they come out, I mean, I hope you've got friends in a low cost environment that can hire a whole bunch of humans to deal with that stuff, because it's not pretty, especially in the more esoteric stuff where people have a hard time with. I mean, dealing with a simultaneous split, acquisition, and rights issue on a convertible bond is not the simplest thing in the world.
No, of course. So this again comes back to our attempt not to be all things to all people. Okay, by focusing on a very narrow area, we would like to become best of breed for that particular scenario. So rather than having armies of monkeys on the keyboard figuring out the corporate action scenarios, we would essentially like to keep it quite low, lean initially, but with one very restricted area that we would essentially be best of breed at, which I think would be manageable in that instance. Once we've got that reliability and we're known and we have a reputation for that, I think it's then it then becomes easier for us to move into different verticals, essentially, which is then a naturally scalable scenario with more employees to take care of the actions.
And on the pricing, we're not looking to be the Ryanair of data streams. So we're not looking to compete purely on price. It's also going to be competing on technology. How easily available is it to clients, which is hopefully what they will be willing to pay a premium for.
Hi there. You mentioned data cleaning a number of times.
Yep.
You also mentioned real-time data,
Yep.
so market reads. Real-time cleansing of data is a domain that so far has proved, as you know, because you've commented on it as a market problem, very difficult. Technically, how are you going to approach that?
So again, this really comes back to how timely people need the data. I would say, okay, so just to give you some background, my previous role was cleaning equities data based on a few retail scenario feeds. We could handle a certain degree of lag in that. If we were to go with very high real-time data, we would have to, I mean, I can't lie, we would have to have a certain degree of lag by the time we've cleaned it. I mean, there's an automated component, there is a manual component. And as much as we possibly could, we were trying to automate. That's essentially my background, is automating this sort of stuff. I would say there's always going to be a slight lag. And we would need to be able to essentially find a particular area that we could cope and get the best real time that we could, essentially.
Thanks very much, guys.
Okay.